The smell of lemon cleaner clung to the air as I carried the bakery box through my parents' front door. Mom was in the kitchen, fussing with a thrift store cake stand, while the roasted chicken filled the split-level house with its heavy warmth. Aunt Margot was already moving vases around the dining table, nudging lilies an inch this way and that, as though flowers could raise our family's standing. I placed the carrot cake on the counter and slipped into my usual role, reliable, invisible. Celeste swept in 10 minutes late, hair done, voice carrying, announcing she'd just had coffee with a buyer from Shorewood Hills. She had no gift bag, no dessert, no card, only her story. Everyone leaned in as if she had brought gold. Dinner moved along the familiar grooves, Dad pouring himself another glass, Mom smoothing napkins, Aunt Margot nodding like an audience member. I was cutting the cake when Dad looked at me, chuckled, and said "You'll never be as good as your sister." The room broke into laughter, easy and unthinking. Celeste grinned wider. Mom chuckled too, like it was harmless. I kept my face steady while my chest tightened. My hands moved automatically, sliding cake onto plates. But inside, I was burning. The words clung to me heavier than the smell of lemon cleaner. No one noticed the silence settling over me. They were too busy following Celeste's next story about a downtown condo listing. When the evening ended, I gathered my jacket without comment. By the time I pulled into my apartment's cracked driveway, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom lit the screen. "Next time, bring paper towels. We're out." I set the phone down, the glow still sharp in my eyes, and thought of everything I had never said. Back in my apartment, the text about paper towels wouldn't leave me alone. It tugged at a thread that unraveled years of habits, each one tied to money quietly leaving my account. I remembered the first time Dad called during a heavy snowstorm. The power bill was higher than expected. Could I spot them $120 until Friday I was 21, earning just enough at the university office to cover rent on my studio? I sent the money without hesitation. Friday never came, but February did. And so did another request gas money this time. By March, it was groceries. Mom's voice had carried that strained mix of apology and expectation. So I told myself I was doing what a good daughter should. The pattern settled in. Every first week of the month, I transferred $300 for utilities. On Wednesdays, another $40 or $60 for groceries. By my mid-20s, it was routine, like brushing my teeth or checking my email. I drove to Woodman's more times than I can count, dropping off bags of produce and pantry staples while Celeste posted selfies at the Memorial Union Terrace. I bought a thermostat from the Home Depot on Stoughton Road, installed it myself because Dad's back was acting up again. When the water heater gave out, my card covered the plumber's deposit. Through it all, I told myself love looked like reliability. That being dependable was my identity, even if no one thanked me. Celeste remained the star, the golden child with the dazzling smile. I was the background hum, steady but forgettable. One night, scrolling through my banking app, I began saving screenshots of each transfer. At first it was accidental, then it became deliberate, folder by folder, month by month. I collected proof of a life lived in quiet transactions. The folder grew until it felt heavier than my silence, and I knew sooner or later it would demand to be opened. Celeste knew how to fill a room, even if it was just with her phone camera. She staged open houses on Monroe Street with bowls of bright lemons on spotless counters, then posted reels of herself laughing on porches she didn't own. On warm evenings, she posed at the Memorial Union Terrace, a plastic cup of beer raised high, the lake stretching out behind her. Each post gathered likes that seemed to confirm everything our parents already believed. At family gatherings, her stories became the centerpiece. Mom told anyone who would listen that Celeste was on her way to becoming the top realtor in Dane County. Dad bragged about her networking skills, how she knew the right people. When bills came up in conversation, they rewrote the past so seamlessly it almost sounded true. Thanksgiving, when the water heater had failed. Mom smiled at Aunt Margot and said, "Celeste made the calls that saved us." I sat there remembering the plumber's deposit charged to my card, the receipt still in my folder. Meanwhile, My own life shrank to make space for theirs. I skipped dinners with coworkers because I had sent another transfer that afternoon. I pushed off a dentist appointment for 2 years, always telling myself I'd reschedule when things were less tight. Even the chair at my kitchen table wobbled every time I sat down. A Craigslist find I never replaced because there was always something more urgent for them. Then came the moment that stung most. Aunt Margot, rearranging flowers like always, leaned across the table during one of Celeste's stories and said, "She's the reliable one, isn't she?" Mom nodded, Dad chuckled, and Celeste grinned. The word reliable was meant for me, the daughter who kept their lights on and their fridge filled. But in that instant, I realized my role had been stolen and repainted in brighter colors, and I had stayed too quiet for too long. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the folder of screenshots and felt the weight pressing harder, as if it were daring me to count. Sleep had become a stranger to me. The more I tried to shut my eyes, the more the words from that dinner replayed in my head. I finally gave up, reached for my phone, and opened the banking app. The glow lit up my small apartment, the only sound the hum of the old radiator. I started scrolling. The transfers stretched back further than I wanted to admit: utilities, groceries, gas, car repairs, the endless list of just this once. Each line carried a date, an amount, and a note that I had typed without thinking: groceries, utilities, help. At first I skimmed, but soon I was reading each one as though they were entries in a diary I had forgotten I was writing. I told myself I would stop after a few months, but my thumb kept moving. Years passed on the screen in minutes. By the time I reached the beginning, the total in my head had grown into something I couldn't ignore. I scribbled numbers on a pad by my couch, my pen pressing deeper with every sum. When I finally stopped, the figure stared back at me, nearly $29,000. The number hit me harder than any insult ever had. It wasn't just money. It was the trips I hadn't taken, the savings I never built, the dentist appointments I skipped, the weekends I stayed home while Celeste posted photos from another lakeside restaurant. I sat there, pen trembling, wondering how I had let silence cost me so much. The next morning, I walked to the university library and printed page after page of bank statements. I bought a cheap green binder from the dollar store on East Johnson and spent the evening hole-punching and filing each sheet. On the cover, I wrote a single word: household. As I slid the final page inside, the binder felt heavier than paper should. It was no longer just proof. It was a record of my silence, and I knew the day would come when silence would not be enough. The following Sunday, I drove back to the house on the east side, the green binder tucked under the passenger seat like a secret. I had told myself I wouldn't need it, that maybe this dinner would pass without commentary, without comparison, but I brought it anyway. Inside, the same lemon cleaner hung in the air. The table was set, the chicken roasting, Aunt Margot circling the lilies. Celeste breezed in 20 minutes late, heels clicking, carrying a glossy bag. She pulled out a candle wrapped in gold tissue and set it in front of Mom with a flourish. Mom clasped her hands like she'd been handed an heirloom. I stood there with the bakery cake in my arms, suddenly invisible. We ate. Celeste filled the room with chatter about an upcoming open house and a client from Shorewood Hills. Dad laughed along, leaning back in his chair, glass of wine in hand. I waited for the moment, though I already felt it circling. It came after dessert, the plates still warm with crumbs of carrot cake. Dad looked at me, chuckled as if repeating a harmless joke, and said it again: "You'll never be as good as your sister." Aunt Margot let out a small laugh, shaking her head, and added, "Celeste is the one we can always rely on." The words landed heavier this time. My chest burned, my hands tightened around the fork. I thought of the binder in the car, the nearly $29,000 written across my silence, and something inside me snapped. I set the fork down and looked straight at Dad. "Then tell her to pay all the bills," I said, steady and clear, "because I am not sending money anymore." The room went still. Mom gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. "What, are you crazy?" Celeste blinked, then smirked like she'd been given another line to star in. Dad frowned, the chuckle gone, but he didn't speak. Aunt Margot shifted uncomfortably with the flowers she had been fussing over all evening. No one moved. The silence stretched. And for once, I didn't rush to fill it. I let it sit there, heavy as the binder waiting in my car, knowing the next moment would demand more than quiet. The next Sunday, the invitation arrived in the family group text. The words chipper and bright, dinner at 6. "We'll talk about a plan." I knew what kind of plan it would be. Still. I drove across town. The binder this time not hidden under the seat but resting openly on the passenger side, its weight steady against every turn. When I walked in, the dining table was already laid out differently. The chicken sat carved on a platter, but next to it was a calculator, a neat stack of envelopes, and a pad of paper covered in numbers. Mom straightened in her chair. Dad looked serious in a way he usually reserved for traffic tickets, and Celeste lounged against the counter scrolling her phone. "We've been thinking," Dad began, "with the way prices are climbing, interest rates, inflation. It makes sense for everyone to contribute regularly. A family contribution plan." He tapped the calculator with his finger as if the numbers on the page were inevitable. "Everyone," Mom echoed. "It's only fair." She gestured toward Celeste, who didn't even look up. I sat down slowly, slid the tote from my shoulder, and placed the green binder on the table. "Before we talk about new plans," I said, "we need to talk about the last 4 years." Mom blinked. "What's that, receipts?" I answered. I opened the binder, the pages fanning out, filled with dates, amounts, and notes. Every transfer, every payment, utilities, groceries, repairs. I might have missed a few. The room shifted. Dad's jaw tightened. "This is not the time to play accountant." Mom flipped through a few sheets, frowning. "These were gifts, Tamsin. You wanted to help." "We never asked for any of this." Celeste finally looked up, smirk tugging at her mouth. "Wow, you've really been keeping score, haven't you?" I closed the binder gently, sliding it back toward me. My voice was steady, calmer than I expected. "I am your daughter, not your bank. If you need help, you ask, and you accept no for an answer. But the quiet withdrawals are over." Dad leaned forward, the calculator still beneath his hand. "You're being disrespectful." "What's disrespectful?" I said, meeting his eyes, "is rewriting my life while asking for my checkbook." The silence that followed felt sharper than any argument, stretching across the table like another set of numbers no one wanted to admit, and I knew then that silence would no longer be my role. The night after I set the binder on the table, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The family group chat exploded with messages, Dad warning me not to be dramatic, Mom typing long paragraphs about respect and sacrifice, Celeste chiming in with a single laughing emoji. I muted the thread, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen until the glow steadied my breathing. Then, one by one, I began canceling the transfers, utilities, gas, groceries. Each click ended a cycle I'd lived inside for almost a decade. When the prompts asked, "Are you sure I hit yes every time?" The next morning, I set up a new transfer, this one to my own savings account, on the same dates, in the same amounts I used to send them. It felt both petty and necessary, like reclaiming a piece of myself. I shut the laptop and laced up my running shoes. The Yahara River Parkway was quiet, mist rising above the water, geese cutting through the air. My body hadn't moved like this in years. I counted each breath, each step, as if I were tallying something new. By midday, Aunt Margot invited me to coffee with the promise. Not an ambush. Dear, of course, it was. She smiled over her cup, rehearsed lines tumbling out about family unity and bridges not burned. I listened until her words blurred into the clatter of spoons, then told her I was leaving. Accuracy wasn't cruelty, I reminded myself as I walked out. That night, Mom posted on Facebook, "Raising children is hard when they forget where they came from." Friends and neighbors flooded the comments with sympathy. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the co-op on Willie Street, bought berries, salmon, and a brand of yogurt I had always skipped because it felt unnecessary. Relief and grief braided themselves together as I unpacked the bags. I was lighter, but I was also lonelier. Still, when I lay down that night, my body unclenched in a way I hadn't felt in years. Sleep came without calculation, and I knew something had shifted for good. The first cracks showed up online. Celeste posted a photo of her new sneakers with the caption "self-made." The skyline of downtown Madison blurred behind her. I stared at the image for a long time, remembering the months I had covered her rent under the label emergency. Dad texted soon after, "We're a unit. Tamsin. Everyone does their part." Mom followed with a long message suggesting a fresh start. "Let's just agree on a number. Maybe $300 a month. That way there's no confusion." She added a smiley face at the end, as if that softened the request. That same week, a letter arrived at my apartment, addressed to my parents but forwarded to me because my address was still on some old paperwork. A collections notice, $312 past due. I held it in my hands, the familiar pull of habit tugging at me. For a moment, I imagined opening my banking app, covering it before it damaged their credit. Instead, I scanned it, typed a new email, and forwarded it to both of them with the subject line, "This is your bill, not mine." No explanation, no paragraph, just the truth. At the next dinner, Celeste avoided my eyes at first. For a second, I thought she might say anything that admitted she knew the truth of what I had carried. But when Dad raised his glass and Mom talked about family resilience, Celeste leaned back, tossed her hair, and doubled down with a story about closing a deal that didn't sound real. The smirk was back. The moment passed. That night, back in my apartment, I set a new rule: no banking app after 9 at night. Whatever balance waited there could not fix my family at 9:01. I plugged my phone across the room, crawled into bed, and let the silence hold me. The calls kept coming, the spin kept circling, but for the first time I felt like I had stopped orbiting them. Something steadier had begun, and I was learning to live inside it. The first Sunday I didn't drive to their house. I stayed in my apartment and made pancakes. The smell of butter and syrup filled the kitchen, and I let myself linger at the table with a long call to a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. It felt almost rebellious to spend a Sunday morning on myself instead of carrying groceries across town. During the week, I finally scheduled the dentist appointment I had postponed for years. The clinic on Regent Street was nothing fancy, but sitting in the waiting chair, I realized how much I had neglected in the name of being dependable. The bill was mine alone, and I paid it without guilt. The family messages didn't stop. Mom texted updates about Celeste's listings, slipped in comments about how family sticks together. Dad added a line or two about tough times. Celeste sent a photo of herself at a closing, tagged with a champagne glass emoji. The tone had softened, but the narrative hadn't changed. No one thanked me for years of bills. No one admitted what I had carried. They just kept talking as if the silence would rewrite the past. One afternoon I walked into the Dane County Courthouse, papers in hand, and changed the address on lingering accounts. No more notices would land in my mailbox. No more unpaid reminders disguised as responsibility. Leaving the building, I felt lighter, as though I had finally returned something that never should have been mine. That night, I wrote down a new rule on a scrap of paper and taped it above my desk. Help, if asked clearly and respectfully, will be considered. Otherwise, the answer is no. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. I looked at the green binder on the shelf, closed tight, and understood that the next chapter of my life would not be measured in quiet withdrawals. The sun dipped low over Lake Mendota as I walked the lakeshore path. the water flashing gold where kayaks moved across the surface. The air was cool, steady against my skin, and for the first time in a long time, my steps felt unhurried. My phone buzzed in my pocket, another group text, another update about Celeste's newest win. I glanced at it, typed a neutral reply, and slipped the phone away. No money attached, no hidden strings. Back home. I opened a small box I'd been keeping on my desk. Inside was a brass key I'd found in a drawer, once meant for a lock that no longer existed. I set it in a shadow box and wrote one word across the backing boundaries. I hung it above my desk, not as a decoration but as a reminder of where the line now stood. The green binder stayed in my closet, wedged between old yearbooks and a winter blanket. I didn't need to carry it into every conversation, didn't need to brandish it like a weapon. Its job was done. It held the truth I had doubted for too long, and knowing it was there was enough. Even when messages arrived, Mom sending a photo of the dog, Dad dropping hints about tight months, I no longer felt the old pull to fix it. Their story was still their story. Mine had shifted. I poured a glass of water, sat at my desk beneath the brass key, and let the quiet hold me. For once, silence felt like mine. I will not let anyone turn my love into a bill.